Christopher Cardona es abogado, es jefe de nivel global de la sección de seguros y reaseguros de Holman Fenwick Williams de Londres, Inglaterra. Se especializa en resolución de disputas internacionales de alto valor en el sector de seguros y reaseguros. Es particularmente conocido por su amplio trabajo en los mercados de América Latina. Es miembro de la Asociación Británica de Derechos de Seguros. También dicta conferencias regularmente sobre temas de seguros y reaseguros y asesora al mercado de seguros sobre cuestiones de política, regulación, desarrollo de productos y formulación de políticas en seguro. Él es bilingüe, inglés-español, y está catalogado por la Chambers UK, cito textualmente, posee una considerable experiencia en reaseguros y seguros, tiene una notable reputación en el manejo de trabajo para los principales clientes de toda América Latina. Christopher está clasificado dentro de esta Chamber de UK para advocates, abogados, en el top 1, como la Premier League. Y es abogado líder en Latinoamérica por esta organización. Es descrito como un abogado educado, directo y brillante por la Chamber en UK. Y también la Chamber Latin America destaca su profunda experiencia en los mercados de habla hispana en América Latina para temas de seguros y cuenta con una amplia experiencia en litigios de seguros y reaseguros relacionados a América Latina y los mercados anglosajones. Demos un fuerte aplauso, por favor, a Christopher Cardona, y su ponencia va a ser Línea Financiera, 3B y Bancos.
Muchas gracias.
Aquí te pongo. Este es tu.
Esto aquí.
Perfecto.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Ya.
Bueno, vamos. Antes de nada, quiero asegurar que me puedan oír bien. A ver, ¿está bien así? Muy bien. Pues prefiero esto que creo que esto. Bueno, buenos días a todos y gracias por recibirme. Yo soy Chris Cardona, como ya me han explicado, y la presentación de hoy la voy a hacer en inglés, principalmente, pero hablo castellano y de vez en cuando trataré de explicar el punto en español, si quizás para que lo puedan captar un poco mejor. Por seguro que ustedes también hablan inglés. Bueno, hoy vamos a hablar sobre Financial Institutions Insurance. Es un tema bastante, no complejo, pero es muy amplio. Hay muchas cosas que hablar. Podemos hablar todo el día sobre esto. Es un tema que llevo yo muchos años trabajando en Latinoamérica y quiero aquí antes nada explicarle hoy qué voy a cubrir en mi presentación, qué temas voy a tratar. Esto es para darle una visión de lo que voy a cubrir. So, I'm going to talk about FI insurance. What is financial institutions insurance? Normally, when you talk about financial institutions insurance, we're talking about three different products, but they're often united. They come together in one single policy. And it's the three Bs, bankers, blanket bond, FIPI, and that's financial institutions professional indemnity insurance. So the professional indemnity cover afforded to financial institutions, and then separately D&O, Directors and Officers Liability Insurance. So we often see the three things together. So I'm going to look more closely at the cover offered by a banker's blanket bond policy, but although it says blanket, it's not blanket, there are exclusions, so we have to look at the exclusions and make sure we understand them. I'm going to look at the interesting issue of notification and proof of loss in a BBB context. And then I'm also going to look at aggregation, because it's classic in a BBB context. It's very rare to just have, unlike in, say, in a marine context where you have one incident, or in an industrial loss you have one fire or one explosion. In a financial institutions context, you normally have many different components of the loss. And so the issue is, how do you aggregate all those different components? Are they one loss, or are they many separate losses? And that has obviously implications for the policy, deductibles, limits of indemnity, and so on. And then I'm going to look at separately FIPI cover. La cobertura FIPI es Financial Institutions Professional Indemnity, como ya expliqué antes, y cómo se enlaza con el BBB. Porque there is an overlap. Las dos cosas se enlazan. Y luego D&O, también vamos a ver un poquito qué es D&O y cómo funciona. Y por último vamos a hablar sobre un tema bastante también interesante, que es la jurisdicción y la ley aplicable a las pólizas de seguro en este ramo. Y throughout my talk, I'm going to talk about some examples and some cases that we are have done over the years, just to give it a bit of context. Okay, so that's the overview. That's what I'm going to cover. And now we can start with the banker's blanket bond. So as the name suggests, blanket bond means it covers many things, but in fact, as I said earlier, it isn't actually a complete, there are very specific covers, and people have to understand that the terms of the insuring clause have to be satisfied for the claim to be covered. The most important thing to remember about a banker's blanket bond is that it's not a liability policy. No es una póliza de responsabilidad civil. Es una póliza de first party, as we call it. First party policy. And that is very important. It is a banker's blanket bond is essentially a property policy. So it's no different to a property policy. It covers property owned or retained or in custody with a financial institution. It's not a third-party policy, it's a first-party policy. And also, it's a discovery-based cover. This is important because it only covers losses that are discovered during the currency of the policy. Es una póliza de descubrimiento. So it's very important to remember that the losses have to be discovered during the policy period. You also hear the term commercial crime quite a lot in this context. So what is a commercial crime? Commercial crime cover is the same as a banker's blanket bond, but it's the policy that's taken out by non-financial institutions. So it's ordinary companies buy commercial crime cover as opposed to banks that buy the banker's blanket bond. What risks are covered by the banker's blanket bond? The most important one, and the one that everybody talks about, and the one that gives rise to most claims, is the employee dishonesty provision, la deshonestidad de los empleados. Y es por eso que esta póliza normalmente se compra. Los bancos compran porque quieren amparar la deshonestidad de los empleados. Secondly, premises hold-up losses. So if there is a hold-up, un asalto in a bank, in a financial institution, the policy will respond. Similarly, forgery, la falsificación, forgery of certain documents. We're going to look at that. And also cash in transit. So if cash is being moved from A to B, as I said, it is a physical property policy. So if a bank is moving cash from currency from A to B, it is covered in transit also. And finally, if the bank sustains a loss as a result of counterfeit currency, the policy covers it also. So that's the scope of the policy. But remember, it's a property policy, not a liability policy, as distinct from this policy, which is the FIPI, in Londres they llaman FIPI policy. That is a cover that is often tagged on, es una extensión que se añada a la póliza BBB, and that is una cobertura de tercera parte, third-party cover. It covers the liability that the financial institution has to third parties. As opposed to the losses that itself suffers. And this is a claims-made policy. It's not a discovery policy. This is a claims-made policy, which means that the claim has to be made during the currency of the period, of the policy. So, what liabilities are covered in an FIPI policy? It covers claims brought by third-party customers. So, customers, individual or institutional customers of the bank, of the financial institution, alegando un error u omisión, E&O, in the execution of a professional service or a failure to render that service. So professional services, I mean, banks render lots of services, not just straightforward retail banking, but lending, management of trusts, securities, brokerage services, real estate services, loan origination, wire transfers, financial advice, financial advisors, and tax planning, and so on. So all these things are professional services that the banks are normally in the business of providing. And if those professional services are not fulfilled, then there is an E&O in the execution of that service, and that could render a claim. They could render the bank liable to the third party and trigger a claim under the policy. So this is what the scope of the cover is. I want to look now at, in a bit more detail, at the clauses that give the cover under the BBB. Now, as I said before, the most important clause in the banker's blanket bond is insuring clause 1, which is la cláusula de deshonestidad de los empleados, employee dishonesty. I don't know whether you guys have come across the standard London market wordings that we see in Latin America all the time. I know, Yolanda, I'm sure you've seen them. La DHP 84, la DHP 84, y la NMA 2626. Those are the two standard wordings that we see all the time in these policies. Now, these policies are London market wordings that have been prepared for the London market in English, and they have been translated into Spanish. And we know that that has given rise to many issues because sometimes the translations are not accurate, the problems arise in the translation. But essentially, I want to look at the DHP 84 first of all, and then I'm going to compare it with the 2626, because underwriters can pick and choose. And sometimes they use one wording, sometimes they use another. But the first one, insuring clause 1, says that losses are covered that result directly from dishonest or fraudulent acts by employees, committed alone or in collusion with others, with the manifest intent to cause the insured to sustain such loss. Let's just pause there. So there has to be it's got to be a direct loss, it can't be indirect. Direct loss, dishonest or fraudulent. Dishonest or fraudulent doesn't necessarily mean criminal. Tiene que ser deshonesto, fraudulento, pero no necesariamente penal. No se necesita una penalidad realmente. Es suficiente que sea el acto deshonesto o fraudulento. And it's got to be alone or committed in collusion with others. But this is the key bit. With the manifest intent to cause the insured to sustain the loss. Tiene que haber una intención manifiesta para causarle un siniestro al banco. Now, that DHP 84 only requires intent. But now let's look at 2626, which is a bit broader. I say, well, broad, it's more restrictive, actually, not broad. I'm sorry, that was a mistake. So insuring clause 1 in 2626, the first bit is the same. But when you look at the third line here on the slide, la tercera línea, it says, so the act committed by the employee with the intention either to cause the insured to sustain loss or to obtain personal financial improper personal financial gain to the said employee. So se tiene que probar una intención bien de causarle un daño un siniestro al asegurado o una intención de lucrarse él personalmente él mismo. Pero ahí también estamos hablando solamente de la prueba de la intención de ganarse un lucro. Pero no necesariamente hay que probar que se ganó un lucro, que se lucró. Solamente la intención de lucrarse. Ahora, ese es el 2626, pero en la condición 1 aquí pone, notwithstanding the foregoing, cuando estamos hablando de loans or trading, cuando estamos hablando de préstamos o de comercios, de una situación comercial, loans or trading, the insuring clause covers only direct financial loss that results from dishonest or fraudulent acts committed by the employee whereby an improper personal gain is obtained by such employee. So here, you have to actually prove that there is a gain. Entonces, en esta cláusula hay que probar que se ha lucrado el empleado infidel. And this is usually quite difficult. Many of the cases that we've been involved with, identifying the actual gain by the employee can be very difficult. Sometimes it's easy, but sometimes these fraudsters are very sophisticated, especially these days, and it's very difficult to actually identify the gain that they've actually made. And then the second condition, I want to mention also that we often see that these fraudsters sometimes create these frauds, they make a gain, but in fact, their gain is by way of, because they're going to get a bigger salary or a big bonus as a result of what they've done. And those elements they do not constitute improper financial gain. So anything to do with remuneration, salary, bonuses, and so on, for the employee is not enough. You've got to actually find some money in his bank account, basically, some money in his pocket. Okay, so that's the most important insuring clause 1, and that's really what most financial institutions buy BBB for, to cover the infidelity of employees. But as I said earlier, because it's a physical policy and it covers loss of property, hold-ups and cash and securities held by banks that are stolen are also covered, and that's insuring clause 2. So it's property within the premises being lost through theft, mysterious disappearance, or property that's lost or destroyed or misplaced, while such property is within the premises. Terrorism is not included in the standard wordings, either DHP 84 or 2626. It's excluded. So if terrorism cover, a fact of life these days, is required, you have to buy it separately with a terrorism extension. It can be quite expensive. I then mentioned here Valledupar, Banco de la República Colombia, because I think that I'll get just a couple of minutes, because it's a case that we did, and it gives you it illustrates the difficulties sometimes with these hold-up claims. This is actually a massive claim in Central Bank of Colombia. $30 million in cash was actually taken in cash from the vaults of the Central Bank of Colombia. Over a weekend, buses came in, took the whole lot away. $30 million disappeared. And in fact, it turned out that the $30 million wasn't covered by the policy, because the money that they took away was paper, era papel. Los billetes no habían sido emitidos por el Banco Central. Entonces, lo que se llevaron los ladrones fue papel y no dinero. Entonces, the whole dispute in that case was, did they take away paper or did they take away money? So that was a whole debate about what was covered by the policy or not. I just thought I'd give you that example of the kind of debate issues that arise under these policies. Forgery. Forgery is when the bank relies on forged documents and suffers a loss as a result of forged documents that are presented to it. And the cover is quite restricted, because there's got to be a forgery, a forged signature or a fraudulent alteration of, and then, we're talking about, it's this one here. That the forgery has to be of checks, bills of exchange, bankers' drafts, acceptances, certificates of deposit issued by the financial institution. So it's very specific. It's got to be one of those things. If the forgery is of a letter or something that isn't one of these things, arguably there's no cover. So there's a lot of talk in London about extending this clause, but so far it hasn't happened. And separately, these documents that are forged must be in written characters and of a nature with which the employee is conversant. And the bank must have relied, and now this is a key point, must have relied upon the signature. And there has to be material, and it has to have caused loss. So the bank has to rely on the signature and do something in reliance on the forgery. A definition of forgery, I think it's worth mentioning that, because forgery is often, people get confused about exactly what a forgery is, and the policy actually does cover forgery, and I've got it here. Forgery, the policy defines forgery as the handwritten, so la falsificación, the forgery, tiene que estar manuscrita, handwritten signing or endorsing of the name of another genuine person. So it's got to be, you can't just invent the name of somebody. It's got to be somebody else that you're trying to forge, whose signature you're trying to forge, without authority, obviously. And you have to have intent to deceive. So, but what it doesn't include, it does not include the signing or endorsing of your own name. You can't forge a document by using your own signature, even if you pretend it's not your signature, even if you write a signature which isn't your normal signature in your own name. That is not a forgery. A forgery has to be of someone else's signature. And the policy actually defines this. So it's important to check that the definition of forgery is satisfied. I also mentioned the Al-Ghasaibi losses there, because that was a massive BBB claim. I don't know whether you've come across it. I don't think it affected Peru, but certainly it affected many, many countries, where an Arab family, a member of the Arab family of the Al-Ghasaibis, basically forged lots and lots of documents and gave rise to endless claims under bankers' bond policies and triggering the forgery cover. And this resulted in litigation because the key issue there is were the documents forged or not forged? And there was a big debate about whether they were forging someone else's signature, his own signature, and forensic accountants and forensic handwriting experts had to be involved to determine whether these were forgeries or not. So, having talked about, these are the key covers that we've highlighted, but now let's look at the key exclusions in a BBB policy. What exclusions do you normally find? The first one is losses suffered before a retroactive date. Now, la fecha retroactiva es lo que se llama en español. And sometimes you have una fecha retroactiva because, as I said before, the loss has to be discovered during the policy period. But sometimes an insured wants to buy cover for a period before the policy starts. So essentially a buyback way before the policy starts. And that is normally determined to be the retroactive date, whatever it may be. Could be a year, 2 years, it depends. Could be 10 years. But anyway, the loss has to be, it has to be sustained before the retroactive date, so not after the retroactive date, but it has to be discovered during the policy period. So the loss can be sustained in that period, but then it has to be discovered when the policy is in force. That's why the next exclusion is losses that are discovered prior to the commencement of the policy or after expiry of the policy are not covered. Similarly, acts of directors are not covered. Now that's problematic as well because what is a director, first of all, and what is an act of a director? But in broad terms, the reason why that is there is because the policy is essentially is designed to cover acts by lower employees, not by senior people. Because at the end of the day, a director is an officer of the bank, of the institution. So if it's going to cover losses by directors, it's essentially covering itself for everything. So directors' liability is covered separately, which is why you often see the D&O cover, which is tagged on separately to the cover. But under the BBB, acts of directors not normally covered. Again, non-payment of loans. You get many situations where there are loans that are granted fraudulently even, that are not covered because they're deemed to be commercial losses for the bank. And so, again, not covered. Indirect or consequential losses, as I said at the start, the loss has to be a direct financial loss, not an indirect or consequential loss. Similarly, trading losses, commercial losses, not covered. And lastly, terrorism and war. Notification. As soon as a loss is discovered, it has to be notified. And the policy, the DHP 84 and the 2626, require the loss to be notified within 30 days. And it's a condition precedent. A condition precedent es una condición suspensiva, lo llamamos, se dice creo que en español. Es una condición, bajo el derecho inglés, si hay un incumplimiento de la cláusula de la condición suspensiva, el asegurador se exime de toda responsabilidad. Sin tener que probar perjuicio, no tiene que probar nada. El mero incumplimiento de la cláusula resulta en no pago del siniestro. Pero los 30 días es complicado, porque 30 días es muy poco tiempo, it's very short, and so we know that you also have your own 30 days here in Peru. I'm aware of that. We are aware of your 30 days issue, and that can be difficult. So the important thing is notification only. As long as you notify the loss, you don't have to identify the full extent of the loss, just the circumstance of the loss. And that's enough. Provided you do it within 30 days, you're okay. But proof of loss, la prueba de la pérdida. El proof of loss no es una prueba en términos generales. El clausulado más moderno, que es el 2626, requires a formal proof of loss to be submitted. And this is where, Yolanda, loss adjusters are very, very important because the bank has to be assisted with the preparation of a formal proof of loss. It's not just any old piece of paper, any old email. It's got to be a formal document which requires it's got to be sworn to be as accurate. Es una presentación formal, una declaración jurada por parte del banco, y eso es el proof of loss, que tiene que presentarse within 6 months of discovery. I'm now going to say just a few words about aggregation of losses. It's an issue that, you know, for people like Jonathan and me that we work in these things all the time, is a very important topic because, as I said at the start, especially in an FI context, you know, a loss has many different components. And so is each individual component a loss, or can you put them together to create one loss? And that might have implications for the deductible, because very often, especially these days in the soft market, deductibles have gone right up, largely to get rid of attritional losses. And so if you have large deductibles and many different components, it may be that most of the circumstance will not be covered under the policy. So if you can aggregate them into one loss and then have just one deductible, you might be better off. So, but 2626 actually has some language that is interesting. It says, all loss or losses discovered by the insured which are attributable to the acts or omissions of one person or in which such person is concerned or implicated shall be deemed to be one loss. So basically, if you've got one guy involved in the fraud, you may be able to aggregate everything that that guy has created. And it's quite normal to have, because a fraud, you know, usually involves 1 or 2 or 3 people, but there's usually a mastermind, un protagonista, the main guy. And as long as you've got one, you can say one guy is running the show, you may be able to aggregate everything that that person has created into one loss. So that's something to bear in mind. But a general theme, which we're going to come back to afterwards, is the conflict between the local policy, la póliza que se emite aquí en Perú, la póliza bancaria, pero el conflicto que hay entre esa póliza con la póliza de reaseguro que se emite en Londres. Porque ustedes solo ven aquí la póliza local, pero luego también hay un slip de reaseguro que está firmada por los reaseguradores en Londres o donde sea, en América, donde sea. And sometimes there's a conflict between the two. And that is, again, something that we see a lot of. So you have to be very aware of this. And in my experience, there's been a lot of, because you have these, the first clause aggregation language in the local policy, and then you may have some different language in the reinsurance. Like the reinsurance policy might say, losses arising out of one originating cause, or losses arising out of one event shall be one loss. Cause is broad, event is narrow, generally speaking. So sometimes there may be aggregation down below in the local policy, but it may be more difficult to aggregate in the reinsurance. So that's something just to be aware of. We're going to come back to this theme later. I'm now going to just say a few words about the FIPI cover. It covers a legal liability to third parties. Third-party claim has to have all, so this is when there's a claim from the third party against the bank. BBB is the loss the bank suffers itself, but now we have a claim by a third party. And the 2273, 2273 es el clausulado más frecuente en este ramo. And that says that there has to be, all those things, 1 to 7, have to be satisfied for it to be a valid claim. It's got to be compensatory damages, daños compensatorios, por decirlo así. La reclamación se tiene que hacer durante la póliza, made during the policy period. And it's got to be for a financial loss caused by a negligent act, error or omission of the officer, and in the ordinary course of financial services. Proposal form, porque en el formulario you have to say what services you normally give, and so it has to be one of those services that listed in the proposal form for it to trigger a claim. And then lastly, 567 are to do with the United States. Basically, this is maybe not relevant here, but the act has to be brought, the claim has to be brought outside the USA and Canada. And again, the act or the omission has to be an act that is created or caused, done outside the USA and Canada. So all those things have to be satisfied. Now, as I said, it covers legal liability, responsabilidad legal hacia los terceros. Legal liability is a very Anglo-Saxon concept. Es un tema, concepto se dice, no tema, un tema, sí, un concepto muy anglosajón. Pero hay una póliza nueva, bastante nueva ya, que lleva unos años, NMA 3000, which covers civil liability to claimants. Esa es la responsabilidad civil. Entonces, y eso es más relevante para países como ustedes, como Perú, que tienen un sistema civil de derecho, y eso cubre la responsabilidad civil hacia los reclamantes, clientes del banco que puedan ir al banco a reclamarle dinero. So what constitutes civil liability as a matter of English law may be very different to what constitutes civil liability under Peruvian law. So the definition of civil liability is very important, and again, make sure that the wording is accurate. Because, for example, restitutionary awards, restitutionary award is restitución, que es lo contrario de compensación. Una cosa es compensar a alguien, otra cosa es restituirle algo a alguien. Son dos cosas. Y, por ejemplo, restitutionary awards are covered by a normal 2273 professional indemnity wording. It's got to be compensatory, as I said, not restitutionary. Whereas the 3000 does cover restitution. Okay. Now, we said, ¿cómo se prueba que ha habido responsabilidad legal o responsabilidad civil hacia al tercero? ¿Cómo se prueba esto? El asegurado tiene que probar that it was under a legal liability to the third-party claimant, that the liability is covered by the insurance. And in order to show that there has been a liability, you have to show that, and this is an English case, Post Office and Norwich Union in 1967. It's a well-known case in England, una jurisprudencia importante en Inglaterra, where it was held that to prove that the liability has been established, you have to show that there's been either a judgment of a court, una sentencia de un tribunal, un laudo arbitral o un arreglo entre las partes. Pues una de las tres cosas, un laudo arbitral, sentencia judicial o un arreglo. Y si hay una de esas tres cosas y está documentada, entonces ya hay una responsabilidad frente al tercero establecida, que es lo que se requiere. And what I say here is that when that liability has been established by a judgment or by an arbitration award, normally it's not possible to look behind that judgment to see why, you can't criticize the judgment normally. Once the judgment or the arbitration award has been granted, that's it, you're stuck with it. Unless you can show that the judgment was perverse, que había una corrupción, una cosa perversa, una cosa fuera de una perversidad por parte del tribunal, que es muy difícil de probar. Pero ha ocurrido. So that's important. Then, what are the key exclusions in FIPI policies? Most important, contractual liability. Es decir, la responsabilidad contractual. Porque lo que se está cubriendo aquí es la responsabilidad civil frente al tercero, no la responsabilidad bajo un contrato. And it's very common to have liability, certainly in a banking context, arising under a contract. And if that liability arises under a contract, it may not be covered and very probably would not be covered under the policy. There has to be, we say in England, a tortious liability, which is not contractual. Okay? Dishonest and criminal acts, you can buy it back under 3000, but normally dishonest and criminal acts are not covered by the FIPI policy. Again, bodily injury, property damage, claims, not covered. Any liability which is compensable under the banker's blanket bond has to go to the banker's blanket bond and can't come to the FIPI policy. Fines, penalties, punitives, exemplary damages, again, excluded. And prior knowledge claims. So if the insured, the bank, has some knowledge of a circumstance before inception, obviously not covered. We'll come back to knowledge in a minute, because it's an interesting topic. So it's a third-party claim, and this is really interesting because everybody thinks that a claim means una demanda, una reclamación formal hacia el banco, pero no. Para poder invocar esta póliza de responsabilidad civil, no se requiere una reclamación formal. A third-party claim is considered to be made when the insured first receives a written demand for damages. And that can be an email. It can be anything. As long as the institution has received some claim against them, a claim has been asserted against them. Una alegación es bastante. So, or, as soon as the institution becomes aware of the intention of a third party to make a claim, that is enough to constitute a third party claim. Or becomes aware of any fact or circumstance which could reasonably be anticipated to give rise to the demand. And this is important, as I say in my last bullet there, because the awareness of the insured fixes the policy period. Because when did the financial institution become aware of the circumstance that might give rise to the claim? Was it during this policy or that policy? When he becomes aware, fixes la vigencia. Now I'm going to say a little bit about the third string of the FI suite of policies, BBB, FIPI, and now DNO. This is the third and final piece of the jigsaw, let's say. So what is DNO insurance? DNO insurance covers directors or officers for losses which cannot be indemnified by the company that they work for, basically, or the bank they work for in this context. Normally, when a director or an officer commits a wrongful act, he will try to get compensation from his employer. But if he can't, for whatever reason, the DNO policy kicks in, and he can seek to claim under the DNO policy. And there's no deductible for what's called Side A. Side A cover is really the most important part of the DNO policy. Side B, as it's sometimes called, the corporate reimbursement coverage, is when the company, or the bank in this context, reimburses the entity for the loss that it has paid the director or officer. And there are normally deductibles. And lastly, Side C, not very relevant in this context because that's usually only relevant in a US context where the entity coverage is bought because the bank wants entity coverage for itself, for its liability, normally just for breaches of securities laws. I'm sorry, here we go. Here we go. So securities laws, any liability arising in respect of securities laws breaches would normally be covered if you have Side C coverage. As I said, the basis of the cover is the wrongful act by the director or officer. And that covers errors, misstatements, misleading statements, misrepresentations, omissions, neglects, breach of duty, breach of trust, breach of fiduciary duty, breach of warranty, and those sorts of things. But it does not include deliberate dishonesty or fraud. So it's anything that's wrong, but not really wrong. If it's wrong, if it's fraud or dishonesty, it's not a wrongful act. But it only applies if the insured person is acting as a director or an officer. He can't be off on a frolic doing something outside his normal employment, outside the course of his employment. It's got to be wearing his director or officer hat. And I say no set wording because policies, I've seen many, many DNO policies, and the definition of wrongful act varies hugely from wording to wording. Unlike the BBB policies where you've got the very standard and repeated all the time, DHP 84, NMA 2626, in a DNO context, there is no standard wording. Every company has its own. AIG's got a wording, Liberty's got a wording, this one's got a wording. Everybody has different scopes, and some are broader than others. So make sure that, when you're in a D&O context, make sure that you're looking at the definition of wrongful act, because that's going to be the most important thing to determine whether you can claim under the D&O policy. So who is insured that can vary hugely. So the company needs to ensure that they've got the right breadth of cover. And it can be very broad. It's normal for the definition of director to include not just current directors, but previous directors as well. Not future directors, but past directors are normally covered under the D&O policy. But I said, how does Peruvian law interpret the term director or officer? And that is quite an interesting point, because un director en England may not be un director o un consejero o un miembro del consejo delegado o consejo de administración, depende de cómo se llame aquí. La póliza un director puede puede cubrir a mucha más gente de los miembros del consejo. Entonces hay que tener claridad de qué es un director y qué es un officer, un alto cargo. Tuvimos un caso en Colombia hace poco donde la entidad intentó cobrar por los siniestros que había causado unos altos cargos de la compañía que no eran directores, que no eran miembros del consejo, y realmente they were officers porque eran funcionarios públicos, pero eran gente de muy bajo rango que realmente no estaban amparados bajo la póliza del D&O, pero por la definición por la mala definición y traducción de la póliza, pudieron cobrar todos los siniestros de estos ejecutivos que no eran directors or officers. The term director can include executive directors, obviously, but also non-executive directors, no ejecutivos, shadow directors, and prospective directors sometimes, if you buy that cover specially. And sometimes it's useful to refer to the company's, los estatutos de la compañía, las reglas de la compañía, para definir quiénes son los directores. De facto directors are not insured under many D&O policies because they are not duly elected or appointed. Porque a veces it is necessary to show that they were duly elected or appointed. And if they're not duly elected or appointed, they're not deemed to be a director. Now, a last bullet point there, employees who are not directors can sometimes be covered. And that is a growing trend, because it is quite normal now to see the scope of a D&O policy extend to people that are not actually directors or officers. Employees are often covered as well. And that is something that needs to be considered. It may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, depending what side you're on. So it normally pays for the loss of each insured person arising from a claim. Typically, el siniestro en una baja póliza de D&O lo que suele cubrir es los gastos de defensa incurridos por el director. That is the most important thing. I mean, just by way of example, now in Brazil, you're aware of maybe of the huge corruption scandal that's going on involving Petrobras and others. And so every time a director or an officer of something like Petrobras is investigated, se empieza una investigación contra esa persona tiene derecho de presentar una reclamación por sus propios gastos de defensa. Entonces, hay cantidades y cantidades de estas reclamaciones en Londres actualmente por toda esa defraudación y corrupción, por los gastos de defensa de cada uno de ellos. Y también no solo cubre los gastos de defensa, pero la responsabilidad final que el director tiene que pagar, indemnizar hacia el tercero, hacia la compañía. Pero fines and penalties are not normally covered. So multas, not covered. Criminal conduct, not covered. But civil fines, a veces las multas no son multas penales, pero multas civiles. Y eso sí puede ampararse en algunos casos. Okay. Now, excuse me for a sec. We're going to move on now to a more general topic, which is a topic that is very relevant not just to bankers blanket bond, FIPI or DNO, but in fact to all policies that are reinsured abroad, as many of the policies that are issued here in Peru are. So, and it's important because I say the governing law and the jurisdiction of the policy is very important. I've talked to you about the cover and how afforded by these policies, but these policies have to be interpreted by some system of law. A contract cannot operate in a vacuum. It has to have some meaning. Somebody has to determine what it means and what law is going to govern that policy. So, is the law Peruvian law, or is the law English law, or the law of New York, or whatever? So that's why we've got this. Just remember this diagram. It's relevant to everything that we're talking about, really. You've got the local policy, which has to be por necesidad. La póliza local se tiene que regir por la ley peruana. There's no problem. But you may have a choice. It could be, la jurisdicción puede ser tribunal o arbitraje. Pues hay una elección, puede haber. Pero cuando ya entramos en el contrato de reaseguro, el contrato de reaseguro se puede regir por la ley peruana o por la ley, en mi caso, inglés. Depende. In some countries in Latin America, es obligatorio que el contrato de reaseguro se tiene que seguir la ley del país. En Brasil es obligatorio, en Argentina también, en México es ambiguo, pero en Perú no lo es. Entonces, por ahora hay una posibilidad de que el contrato de reaseguro se rija por otra ley que no sea la ley peruana. Y eso puede causar tensión. So just remember this. So I mentioned this because it can be there can be conflicts between the wordings of the local policy and the reinsurance policy. And sometimes what is the law and jurisdiction of the policy of the slip can be unclear. It's sometimes not enough attention has been given to the clause which says what the law and jurisdiction is going to be. So as I said, it could be local law or foreign law, or it can be silent. Sometimes en el slip de reaseguro a veces se olvidan y no ponen nada. So if it's silent, then what law is going to govern the reinsurance slip? These days that's more difficult because, well, it's more difficult to have nothing because Lloyd's requires what's called contract certainty. Es un movimiento en Londres para tratar de evitar todo este tipo de problema. Entonces empezó hace ya años lo que llamaron contract certainty, la certidumbre de contratos. Y Lloyd's tiene que asegurarse de que todos los requisitos están en el slip. Y uno de ellos es la ley aplicable a la jurisdicción. Entonces hoy en día es raro que un slip no tenga una clara cláusula de ley aplicable a jurisdicción. Pero todavía hay algunas que todavía están un poco ambiguas. Y por último punto aquí es las pólizas. Es importante porque si una póliza de un país, si una póliza de una compañía que no está admitida en este país emite una póliza, por ejemplo, una compañía alemana o inglesa emite una póliza directamente a un asegurado aquí y esa compañía no está admitida para asegurar un riesgo aquí, esa póliza es nula. Pero también es ilegal. Tenemos un caso actualmente nosotros en México donde la póliza que ha sido emitida por una compañía danesa a un asegurado enorme en México directamente no ha habido un front, no ha habido un reaseguro facultativo, es decir, la póliza se emitió directamente al mexicano y esa póliza no solo es nula, pero la compañía ha cometido un crime y hay bastantes dificultades sobre eso. El problema del conflicto entre las pólizas, no quiero también, esto es un debate bastante ya pesado y no sé cómo vamos de tiempo. ¿Vamos bien? Ok. Se ha tratado de evitar este tipo porque la idea es tratar de evitar estos problemas. So, when the reinsurance is back to back, there's no problem. And in English law, there is a presumption, normally, una presunción de que el contrato de reaseguro y la ley, el contrato local, se rigen por la misma ley. So it's a presumption that there is the cover is back to back. Es las palabras que se utilizan. Back to back. Y eso es una presunción, normalmente en los reaseguros facultativos se presume que el reaseguro es back to back con la póliza aquí, emitida aquí en Perú. Y este caso, Western Butch, es un caso bastante conocido donde esa regla se ha establecido. Pero hay un caso en 2009, Western Lexington, que fue decidida por el House of Lords, la Corte Suprema de Inglaterra, donde al contrario de lo Western Butch ha dicho que algunas cosas, como por ejemplo el periodo de cobertura, nunca se va a mirar de una forma distinta a la forma de que se miraría en Inglaterra. So things like that, certain coverage issues are going to be English law regardless of even if local law produces a different result, which is the case in Vassar and Lexington. And lastly, law and jurisdiction or arbitration clause, if there is one, you've got to make it clear. Because the law of the policy, if there's an arbitration clause or a jurisdiction clause, that should be one or the other, typically in an arbitration clause, the law of the arbitration is not necessarily the law of the policy. Pueden ser dos leyes distintas. Y aquí en este caso hubo un caso brasileiro, un caso que acabó en Inglaterra en la Corte de Apelación, un litigio muy complicado porque hubo una confusión que si la póliza se regía por la ley brasileira o la ley inglesa, porque la cláusula arbitral tenía Inglaterra como la sede del arbitraje. Y ahí se decidió que lo que regía era el sistema de ley con la cual había más conexión, una conexión más profunda. Y se decidió que la conexión era más profunda con Inglaterra que con Brasil. Follow the settlements. Eso también se ve mucho en estas pólizas facultativas de que estamos hablando hoy, porque la idea es que la compañía de seguros va a hacer un pago, it's going to make a payment to the insured, and if there is a settlement made by the company in Peru to the insured, the idea is that the reinsurer will then follow that settlement. Le va a seguir ese pago. And you see this clause, which is a typical follow the settlements clause, reinsurance of and warranted, same terms and conditions, and to follow the settlements of the reinsured. The reinsured is the company that's issuing the policy. So that's a typical follow the settlements clause. Now, under English law, the reinsurer has to follow that settlement normally, if there is such a clause, has to follow it, unless the company here in Peru has not settled the claim honestly or has not done a proper and business-like settlement. Those are the tests that have been established under English law. Or, separately, that the claim doesn't fall within the reinsurance anyway. So, if you have a follow the settlements clause, which you tend to see, yo lo veo mucho esta cláusula de follow the settlements, es muy importante que se sepa que el reasegurador va a tener que pagar ese pago, pero siempre que la reclamación sea liquidada, ajustada, en una forma seria y business-like. Porque si no, el reasegurador va a decir que no va a indemnizar. Y por último, quería decir algo sobre follow the fortunes, que es un poco distinto a follow the settlements. Follow the fortunes es seguirle la fortuna, y hay lo que se llama el follow the fortunes clause, que es distinto al follow the settlements clause. Porque el follow the settlements es seguir el pago que ha hecho la compañía de seguros aquí. Mientras que fortuna es everything. Follow the fortunes, pase lo que pase, yo te voy a pagar. Esa es la idea del follow the fortunes. En el mercado de Londres, follow the fortunes no es muy normal. Es raro que se vea follow the fortunes. Mucho más frecuente es follow the settlements. Follow the fortunes is more of a US insurance market concept. But follow the fortunes is sometimes compulsory in local legal regimes. I mean, I don't know about Peru. I don't think it is compulsory here. But if, for example, in Colombia and in Venezuela, you have to, it is in the law anyway, that the reinsurer will follow the fortunes of the reinsured, even if there isn't a follow the fortunes clause in the policy, aunque no haya una cláusula de seguirle la fortuna, la ley del país requiere que el reasegurador le siga la fortuna. Pero en Perú creo que no es así, pero en otros países sí es así. Ok, ahora vamos a hablar sobre las cláusulas de control y cláusulas de cooperación, que también es un tema muy relevante a todo este. Y yo creo que Yolanda que lo conoce bien. Hay dos cosas distintas, no quiero decir, igual la conocen ustedes, la cláusula de cooperación, claims cooperation, and then claims control, two separate things. A typical claims cooperation clause normally has three requirements. The first one is notification. It's a condition precedent. The typical clause says that it is a condition precedent to the liability of the reinsurer that one, the reinsured, la compañía de seguros, shall notify claims as soon as reasonably practicable. That's the notification. Secondly, shall furnish information and keep reinsurers fully informed. And thirdly, shall cooperate with reinsurers. So three things: notification, furnishing information, and cooperation. And the strong form sometimes even requires more than that. It requires no settlement can be entered into unless there's consent of the reinsurer. And note that typically es normal que la cláusula sea condition precedent to liability. Now, we know that in England, the condition precedent, as I said earlier, has a very special meaning. And if there's a breach of the condition precedent, si hay un incumplimiento en la cláusula, then the reinsurer is off the hook. El asegurador no paga. Mientras que aquí en Perú sabemos que el condition precedent no se entiende, una condición precedente no se sabe bien lo que es. Y hay muchas pólizas que yo veo aquí que dicen, es una condición precedente que bla, 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 bla. Y realmente nadie sabe qué quiere decir eso. Habla ahí, está todo el tema de la traducción. Por lo contrario de la cláusula de cooperación es the Claims Control Clause, que es ya más fuerte para el reasegurador, porque ese le da derecho al reasegurador de controlar. The right to control the whole claim and to appoint loss adjusters, lawyers, and so on to run the claim. So really, it's not a cooperation with the cedent, it's controlled by the reinsurer's appointed representatives, lawyers or whatever. And lastly, I wanted just to say that the Claims Cooperation Clause or the Claims Control Clause, you sometimes see both. It's very common to see in the slips both a Claims Control, Claims Cooperation Clause on the one hand, and also a Follow the Settlements Clause. You see las dos cosas. And really, it doesn't make sense to have both things, because there should only be one. Because if you have a Follow the Settlements Clause, it's clear that the regime is that the reinsurer is going to follow the settlement. So you don't need a claims control or a claims cooperation, but the market still uses both things. And I think it causes confusion, in my view. But the law is, certainly under English law, that if you have a control clause or a cooperation clause, that will take precedence over the follow the settlements clause. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me. And if you have any questions, thank you. Has anybody any questions or anything that they want to discuss or any? Sure.
En el caso este acá del Banco de República de Colombia,
Ajá.
al final me quedé con la duda.
¿Cómo se
¿Fue papel
o no papel?
Fue dinero.
Okay, very good question. Fue papel. Correct. Jonathan is correct. But el mercado de Londres no quiso negar la responsabilidad total, no quería dejarle sin pagarle nada. Entonces lo que se hizo es que se creó un fondo, fue una negociación, y en ese caso la reclamación fueron 30 millones, pero los reaseguradores pusieron 3 millones de dólares en un fondo, se lo dieron al Banco de la República y se invocó al público, que el público fuera a reclamar. Si una persona en la calle había recibido billetes que eran billetes no emitidos, billetes que eran papel y no dinero, entonces podía ir al banco y probar que tenía estos billetes, porque claro, el dinero se esparció por todo el país. 30 millones, it went everywhere. The money spread out to the whole country. And shops, people, everywhere. So if you ended up with some of these notes, you could go to the bank, and provided you could prove that they were the right denomination, the right codes, you could they would give you money So there was only 3 million. And in fact, believe it or not, the 3 million was actually not all claimed. So it was actually, I think only about 2.5, 2.6 ended up being paid out. So where the rest of the money went, I guess nobody knows.
Una solución y que ríe con el cliente porque es un big client.
Yeah.
Otra pregunta, por favor.
Buenos días, ¿cómo
Hola.
estás? Mi pregunta iba básicamente dirigida a la cobertura de D&O dentro de esta póliza de Financial Risk.
Yeah.
Y estaba pensando en la afirmación que había hecho usted con relación a que esta póliza que cubría directores o officers solo estaba circunscrita al wrongful act y no al fraude o deshonestidad.
Correct.
Y si esta póliza o en las coberturas está básicamente dirigida a cubrir estos gastos legales en que incurre la defensa del director o del oficial, ¿qué ocurre si al final de ese proceso es considerado culpable?
Very good point.
Le hago esta pregunta porque en la legislación peruana, por ejemplo, el criminal offense has two different points. Uno es aquel que es el guilty y el otro que es el, digamos, willful misconduct, probablemente.
Right.
Okay. Algunas pólizas de D&O en que yo he visto cubren incluso cuando es declarado responsable por un guilty offense,
Right.
no aquel que proviene de un willful misconduct.
Right.
Y en esta, ¿cómo funciona?
No, that's a very good point. Sí, eso es un tema que iba a hablar, pero me pareció que demasiado de detalle, pero es un muy buen punto. Hay unas cláusulas, porque claro, como tú has dicho, la persona que cuando se le investiga o se le ha metido a un error, entonces ya va incurriendo gastos legales y hay cláusulas que le permiten que la compañía haga un anticipo de los gastos de defensa. It's very normal for the cost to be advanced by the insurer. But then, as you say, if he's found guilty, does he have to give the money back? And most policies actually say no, because in practical terms, it's very difficult to get the money back from someone once he's paid his lawyers, you know. But you're right, it is a problem, and that is why el anticipo de los gastos es algo que se está tratando de resistir, de no hacer, porque por ese problema, porque al final del día, si es culpable and he is guilty of a criminal offense, he should not have been indemnified. And that's why insurers are now resisting the advance or the prepayment of defense costs. Yeah,
Okay.
a good point.
Otra pregunta.
¿Cuál es el efecto?
Quería hacerte una pregunta.
Sí.
Si una entidad, por ejemplo, terceriza la supervisión o de los formularios para un préstamo y es esta compañía tercerizada la que, por ejemplo, comete el fraude o la falsificación, ¿estaría cubierta bajo la 3B de la entidad o no?
Si la entidad que usted menciona, la tercerizada, no entendí bien tercerizada, la external, como un consultor al banco, por ejemplo?
No, es a third party.
A third party, no. Yeah, I understand. Okay, a third party, no. The cover is for the bank, okay? It's got to be the loss sustained by the bank. So if the third party that you're referring to...
Work for the bank.
Well, if it works for the bank, no, it's got to be an employee of the bank. It's got to be an employee, because the bank's cover is really just for its own employees, not for third parties. The third party may have its own insurance coverage, and that would be a commercial crime cover as distinct from a banker's blanket bond. But if that third party that commits the fraud doesn't have its own cover, then that would not be covered. Unless there is, and suele suceder esto, que hay un empleado dentro del banco que esté en colusión con esa persona. Entonces ya sí, pero tienes que buscarle el vínculo con la persona dentro del banco para poder hacer la reclamación bajo la póliza BBB.
Y una preguntita más. Comentaste algo del follow the settlement.
Yeah.
Y quería preguntarte, aquí bajo la legislación peruana tenemos que siempre seguir la cláusula de cooperación de reclamos.
Right.
Pero si por el lado de reaseguro el reasegurador nos pide utilizar el follow the settlement, ¿cuál sería el que prevalezca aquí bajo la ley peruana? Sí, tenemos el caso de los dos en paralelo.
Okay. Yo no soy abogado peruano, entonces no te puedo contestar formalmente, pero lo que sí te puedo decir es lo siguiente. Creo que habrá abogados peruanos aquí que quizás puedan decir mejor que yo, pero what I would say is if the reinsurer is insisting on a follow the settlements clause, that's actually good. That's good for the local market because it means that the reinsurer has to follow the settlement that is entered into here. So actually it's good. I think if the more difficult is when the reinsurer says, I want complete control and you guys can't have no say.
Pero pueden haber las dos en paralelo en todo caso.
Yeah, if you have the two in parallel, you can, but I think it's not very logical to have it. The market does use both together, but if you have the two, the control clause or the cooperation clause normally will override, va a prevalecer esa sobre el follow the settlements. Okay? So if you want to follow the settlement, make sure you don't have a control clause. That would be my advice.
Gracias.
Oh,
¿Hay otra pregunta?
yeah.
Una última pregunta que es más una duda, aunque de repente es un poco sonsa. Y me refiero, esta póliza, el BBB,
Yeah.
Blank Bond, que cubre básicamente property.
Property, the property policy, correct. Por otro nombre.
Las coberturas assault
Yeah,
against the bank, ¿ok?
yeah.
¿Qué pasa con aquel dinero del cliente que ya está en el banco, en ventanilla, y es parte del robo? ¿Y le alcanza la cobertura?
That's a good question also. Actually, the money that is in a bank belongs to the bank. It doesn't belong to you. So if there's a hold-up, the bank has a claim for the money that is stolen, for its loss. El siniestro la pérdida es del banco. Ahora, el banco te debe dinero a ti, porque es tu dinero. Entonces, tú tienes una reclamación contra el banco. And that is, por eso ahí está el enlace, y es por eso que la póliza BBB sola no le sirve al banco. El banco tiene que también comprar. Yo no soy corredor de seguros, pero es que es buen punto, porque el banco necesita también la cobertura de responsabilidad civil frente a sus clientes, para protección a sus clientes, porque los clientes van a demandar al banco el dinero que se les roba. Pero la reclamación es del banco, no del tercero. Okay.
A ver, Alfieri.
Right.
¿Cómo se llama? En el tema de proof of loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
¿Qué pasa si es que pasan los 6 meses y no,
Okay.
se ha presentado todo el tema?
Yeah, and that's often a very good point, because it takes ages for these losses to, especially the complicated ones, for the loss to be adjusted. So that's your job, to put together the proof of loss. And what I would suggest, and what normally you see, is you apply for an extension. Important to apply to make sure the 6 months doesn't expire. So if you see that it's running out, you would ask for an extension of time.
Pero, ¿qué pasa si es que al final no cumpliste y no pidiste la extensión?
Okay, that could be a problem. Could be a problem. Yeah. Again, it depends what law governs the policy. If it's Peruvian law, which it would be, I guess, if it's in Peru, and si es un incumplimiento de una cláusula que dice, es una condición de que tiene que hacerlo en 6 meses, si no lo hace, ¿qué es el remedio aquí en Perú? It depends.
Yeah.
In England, it's a condition precedent, and as I say, el reasegurador o la aseguradora te puede decir, no te pago. But in Peru, it's probably not so bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Buenas. Quisiera consultar cuáles serían las principales extensiones de cobertura que podríamos conseguir bajo esta póliza, como por ejemplo para los cajeros automáticos.
Sí.
¿Qué otro tipo de extensiones podemos conseguir?
Sí, eso sí existen. ATM extensions are possible and do exist, sí existen. Yo he visto muchas pólizas que también computer crime cover es una extensión que se ve también bastante. Hoy en día la póliza cyber es una póliza que también creo que ayer se habló, no estuve yo aquí, pero ayer hablaron ustedes de eso. Pero es muy, en concreto, tú preguntas sobre los ATM. And the banker's policy can often extend not just to the premises of the bank, but to its ATMs wherever they may be situated. So it's important to define the premises. Or the policy will have to say premises, branch in Miraflores, branch in blah, 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 ATM in the airport. So you have a whole list. And it's possible. And if it's defined as a premises, you don't need an extension. But if it's not defined in the premises, or what constitutes premises, you may want to buy a separate ATM cover, which is available as an extension.
¿Y me va a cubrir el dinero y el ATM también?
¿El dinero y qué más?
¿Y el cajero?
El cajero físico.
El físico.
Yes, absolutely, yes. The damage to the actual machine, yes. Yes. I'm sorry, not if it's, no, I'm sorry, that's mistaken. That's property damage. Under the BBB policy, it would not be covered. It might be covered under a property policy that the bank has, but not under the BBB, because physical damage is not covered under a BBB. No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. No.
Otra pregunta. Por aquí levantaron la mano. Bien.
Thank you very much.
Sí, no hay más preguntas, entonces
Muchas
le damos un
gracias
fuerte
a todos.
aplauso.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias, Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vamos a proseguir con el programa.
Okay.